I look back on the music that I loved as a kid, and it seemed like, from 8th grade until graduating high school seemed like forever, but it's like that as an adult. You turn around, like we went 7 years between Gruesome albums, that's a high school and a half almost, so it's like you need to get it done, and you need to sort of be in the moment, because that's sort of part of what makes projects work. It's not just that the material is good, the execution's good, the artwork is good, the marketing is good. It's also the time and the context in which all of this stuff happens is, and that's something you can't control unless the only control you have is getting it done.
What's up, everybody? It's your boy Keefy from GhostCultMag.com. And like a movie villain, we meet again, Matt Harvey.
I'll twirl my mustache a little bit for you.
Yeah, right? Yeah. With that voice, right? You got to do that voice. So, man, like I just said, another season, another album. We're here to talk about Gruesome's new album, Silent Echoes, out now as we record this. This will run sometime after. Congrats. Killer new album on Relapse. What just the perfect place in general. You've got a long association with the label, but also for this project, super cool and super important that it be, the home of death and a lot of heavy things about this record, but a lot of great things to talk about this album as well.
Well, thank you for the kind words. Yeah, I'm excited that it's out. It's also kind of a relief after all this time. So yeah, it's good.
I don't think I've ever asked you this. I know we just said how, how hardworking and hustling you have to be a working musician in this day and age. At what point, you write a record, you work with your different bands and your collaborators. Is it hard for you to say, this is enough, this is done? And do you leave a record and come back to it to go tour and feel like, oh, I could have did more? You ever have like leftover stuff that doesn't get to come out? I know you have so many different projects, but I wonder if you ever experienced that. I don't think I've ever asked you this.
I mean, there's always more riffs and more ideas, but generally I like to sort of be done. And especially with, death metal, having been involved in it for so long and playing it for so long and stuff, at this point, I feel very comfortable just being like, okay, that's it. And I like deadlines and all of those things, because then you have to be done, because, I mean, we're working on the new Exhumed record, and we're 95% of the way done tracking, but because, Ross is able to track his bass and his vocals at his studio in Oakland. We did all the drums, and I did all my rhythm guitars down here in San Luis Obispo. Sebastian has an entire home recording studio. Well, it's not even a home recording, it's a recording studio in Baltimore. And because we're able to sort of do this at our leisure, it drags on and on. Like, I mean, we started working on this in, I don't know, April, and it's not going to be until mid-June when we're done tracking. And I fucking hate that, I was really resistant to the idea of building our own studio precisely for that reason, because when I'm home, it's like, I'll be like, okay, cool, I got to get, X amount of songs done today. But then it'll be like, oh shit, I forgot to go to Costco and pick up the dog's prescription. Okay, hold on. And then my wife will call me, hey, I need help with this thing, because she runs her own business as well. So I'm like, oh fuck, I should go over there and do that. And then I'm like, okay, well, I got some stuff done. And the next day it's like, oh, I forgot my dad's coming for lunch. And you know what I mean? So it's like, I like when you go somewhere else and you're just there and that's all you have to do. And that's, to me, is when you really kind of lock in and get the work done. But it's just not, I mean, it's a double-edged sword. It's great to have the luxury of having your own space and just be able to continually work on stuff at your own pace and blah, 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 because sometimes life conspires against you and it's not practical to go to wherever for 3 weeks, so it's, I don't know, it's a double-edged sword, but I get frustrated. I don't like things to drag on and on and on, unless it's, something where I'm still kind of learning or finding my voice or trying to figure out what the fuck it is that I'm doing, with death metal and with Gruesome. It's like every album is a specific assignment. So, we know what it's supposed to be, what it's supposed to sound like, what it's supposed to look like, what it's supposed to feel like. And once we're there, it's like, cool, let's wrap it up now. Let's get it done.
Right on. I mean, the flip side is there too, which is if you did have your own space, the downside is probably too not to get lackadaisical at all, but to be like the flip side. Like I think about Chicago in the '70s had their own studio owned by their manager, so they all went to like some remote cabin in Colorado and did
Right.
all the drugs and spent like 7 months making a record. Now they had like 19 guys in the band, so they needed enough time to track all the different things and mix them correctly.
Sure.
But also that process, they even felt weakened their records as they went on, even though, 60s to mid 70s Chicago banger. But just challenge, like, oh, we made our own Frankenstein's monster. We didn't know
Yes.
what we were doing. We actually needed time constraints, a producer not to coddle us, but to dictate and manage a little better.
Yep.
And they learned that the hard way at the end of that decade. But yeah, I could see the flip side also, to having your own space could also, oh, well, this will never end, Winter Sun. We'll just make a record for 10 years. I don't know what's going on.
Right. And I think, it's the old cliche, no piece of art is ever finished. It's abandoned. But I like the idea of having restrictions, because it's, I'm not that different than anybody else. It's like, yeah, of course I want it to be the best it can be. And I want to, I want to represent our songs, at their optimum. But in pursuit of that, you can just disappear up your own asshole, making these like tiny fucking changes that nobody will care about. And then by the time, because really in this business, it's a very what have you done for me lately kind of business. And there's a lot of churn. I look back on the music that I loved as a kid, and it seems like, from eighth grade until graduating high school seemed like forever, but it's like that as an adult. You turn around, like we went 7 years between Gruesome albums. That's fucking a high school and a half almost. So it's like you need to get it done, and you need to sort of be in the moment, because that's sort of part of what makes projects work. It's not just that the material is good, the execution's good, the artwork is good, the marketing is good. It's also the time and the context in which all this stuff happens is, and that's something you can't control unless the only control you have is getting it done. So yeah, I like to get stuff done. And, even had different sound guys that I've worked with on tour or whatever, some of them I've had to pull aside. I'm like, yo, you got to tell us to shut up. Like, you're our boss for the hour we're up here. I don't want to be up here all day, but give me a fucking guitar and an amp and I'll just sit and play forever, and nobody will ever shut up, and no one was like, you got to yell at us, like we're musicians, we're not bright, we you know what I mean, like if we could like run our own lives, we'd be fucking we'd own accounting firms or something.
Oh man, if only we could do our own accountings, we would know our actual income and who's actually paying us for our records. No shade, Relapse, we love you. But yeah, just in general, the big greater music industry, quandaries to ponder as we get into further and further into this streaming era. That's amazing, and I get similar feedback also on me, because all the comments in YouTube.
Sure.
You're fat, you're a beardo. What's up with your vest? Why do you talk too much? But anyway, my show, my rules. Fuck off. And as somebody like you, we vibe. So like, I always appreciate you. So I will tell you, I never have to tell you to shut up, but your sound guy, that's your job, bro. You know what? If I had been smart, I would have made those digital clocks that everybody has on the side of the stage, so at least you know how much time you have, or how much time you have left, or what time you go till. And I would have sold at least 10,000. Oh well. And I probably need one here for my studio, so I know when to shut up. God damn it. So Silent Echoes, man. I'm sure, like everybody else watching, we all felt the death of, the longer we go, we lose our friends. We lose rock soldiers. Sly Stone died yesterday as we do this. Bay Area legend, right? And Sean Reinert was the impetus for some of this new material and this record. I don't think it's quite a concept record, but a lot of it does kind of flow together like a Great Death record. And Sean was a beast, and he was also a beast of a person. He was wonderful, right? I got to meet him and talk to him and interview him in the Cynic days and in the return of Cynic days, and he was just lovely as a human being as much as he was talented. So obviously a hard loss for you as a friend, but also like what a great tribute to pay to him with this record.
Yeah, I mean, I knew Sean. He was a buddy. He wasn't like a close friend, but for Gus, our drummer, he was a really tight. It was like, hey, I heard your sister's sick. How's she doing? Kind of friend. Whereas Sean and I, we would run into each other and we'd have a laugh and we'd hang out and we'd be like, oh, it's great to see you, man. Cool. And then time would go on and whatever. It wasn't that kind of relationship that Gus had with him. But knowing Sean, and especially with how tight Gus was, when we started working on this record, we felt it was kind of it was a little bit of a daunting task, trying to do a companion album to Human. And our whole strategy was like, well, we'll get Sean involved because we'd sort of started writing and then we kind of lost momentum. And like, all right, well, we're gonna get Sean involved as like a producer. We'll send him demos and he can give us notes on the songs. And when we go into the studio, maybe we'll have him come in and listen to takes and this kind of stuff. And especially for the drum parts, because Sean's drumming is so distinctive and was such a game changer. Having him there as kind of an editorial presence was really reassuring. And then beyond just the personal tragedy of his death, it was like, well, there goes that plan. It's like, first, like, fuck, my buddy died. Wow, that's horrible and random. It wasn't like he was sick for a long time and you know what I mean, like when someone has cancer or whatever, you kind of do some of that grieving before they die. It was just literally like Gus called me, he's like, you need to call me. And I was like, what? He's like, Sean's gone. I was like, what do you mean? Where did he, like, on vacation? Like, what? Because it was totally out of the blue. And so, that whole plan that we had just sort of blew up. And so that was a whole other delay. And then, that was when the pandemic was going on. And it was just, I don't know, man, the process of putting this record together was kind of agonizing at times.
I get that, and thanks for sharing. That's got to be so hard, and I know how hard it was. Gus has talked a lot about Sean in the past with me, and I'll tell you, Gus did an incredible job on this record. Again, he doesn't really kind of get the recognition that he can play like Sean and sound like Sean. Close your eyes, and I hear Sean, and it's the same thing on other records. He can sound like Gene or Richard also, or himself, like on his other projects. You can definitely pick out the distinctive things. It's definitely a very well constructed record. It felt very fast. It feels like all the songs are around the same time length. It's not very, it's a very expansive sounding, and like Death was very cinematic. I feel like they don't get enough credit for that, being really one of the first extreme bands that could do cinematic music, and I think other bands were able to follow and do that in the footsteps of Chuck. But yeah, what a fantastic job Gus did.
Yeah, he really he's one of those drummers that his whole philosophy is he serves the song, and I think anytime you're playing with musicians like that, you're going to get a better result because there's something kind of thirsty about the way a lot of musicians play, where it's like, hey, I learned this trick and I practiced it for 10 hours in my bedroom, so I have to use it. I have to show you that I know it. Like, check this out. And it's like, that's cool, that's impressive, but is it really musically good? And often the answer is no. It doesn't really bring anything to the song, because ultimately, like, writing a song or writing music, it's about communicating something. And all of these things that you've learned, these techniques and these fucking arpeggios and paradiddles and blah blah blah, all this shit, if you can't put them together in a way that communicates something effectively, then it's just a bunch of stuff. And so having a drummer that is really good, that isn't dying to show you how good they are all the time, or any member of the band, you could say the same thing about Dan Gonzalez. He's a incredible guitar player, and especially on this record, he gets to do some of his fucking Alan Holdsworth shit, that and he's somehow stuck playing old school death metal for most of his career, where it's like, hey, I could do all this stuff. It's like, yeah, but don't do that here, please. So giving this material gives people a little bit more room to use those chops in a way that makes sense and serves the song. And I think really that's always the focus: is it a good song? Is it catchy? Does it have a hook? Is it heavy? Is it what I want to listen to it? And if the answer is yes, then cool, let's incorporate these things. And if the answer is no, then let's fucking ditch all the bells and whistles and just make something good.
Right on. It writes itself. Thank you for helping me as always with my segues. The next topic was guitars and Daniel's split.
Great.
And the beauty is some of the beautiful guitar work. I love that you said Alan Holdsworth. I don't know anybody younger than us that might not get that reference, but Alan, who's a legendary guitar player, look it up. It's kind of like the last time I saw Atheist open for Suffo, and I was like, oh man, if they didn't have these Atheist songs to play, they could just weirdly become a jazz fusion band. And there's moments on here
Right.
that are very all up in the feels for me, for like Pat Metheny and Alan Holdsworth, like very jazz guitar-y and beautiful transition sections and chill parts that really contrast the brutality and the complexity of the heavier songs. And I think it's probably some of the best work between you and Daniel, like for this project.
Cool, man. It's something that I was very aware that, Sean and Paul were bringing to the Human project. And I think it's something that, you know, as much as Death, especially going into Human, it sort of becomes Chuck's bit thing. And then he surrounds himself with different people. But I think, in the past or before Human, Chuck probably would have, kind of raised his eyebrows, like, you're putting jazz and metal, like that's poser shit. And I think the way that Sean and Paul were able to integrate that influence into Human was really cool. I'm not terribly much of a jazz guy, but growing up, my uncle was a fusion guitar player. So I'm very, I can't help but be aware of Chick Corea and, Return to Forever and Ma Vishnu Orchestra, John McLaughlin, Paco de Luca, all those guys, Al Di Meola, obviously. And in fact, there was one solo that I was doing on the record, and I had this little kind of melodic passage, and I harmonized it. And we're listening back in the studio, and I was like, "What do you think, Jarrett?" And he's like, "Oh, it sounds good." I'm like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Yeah, but does it sound like a metal guy that's just heard Mahavishnu Orchestra in the last 6 months, or just heard Al Di Meola in the last 6 months, and is trying to do that?" And he just started laughing a lot, and I was like, "Okay, so yes, all right, got it. That's what I was going for."
Right on. Well, it's kind of very similar to friends of mine that are like, "Oh my God, have you heard Polyphia or Pliny?" And I'm like, "Well, I have, but I also used to listen to King Crimson in the '80s, so I heard Adrian Belew a long time ago do this very same stuff."
Right.
Also, with Paul, that I think is very important is, obviously he was trained by Andres Segovia, only the greatest guitar player ever for classical guitar and flamenco and jazz and all these things. And so I
Right.
love that you guys brought some of that flavor in too in those passages also, and even I think in some of the heavier solos, it just kind of like sneaks in there a little. You can't help it. Once you start doing it, I think it just kind of leaks
Sure.
in to what you're
And
writing.
yeah, the musical framework that we're using on this record finally allows that to not sound out of place. You don't want it to be like, I don't know, chocolate chips on a pepperoni pizza. It's like, I like chocolate chips, but you don't put them on there. So now that we have this sort of more expanded palette, we can just bring in these other influences and stuff, which is, pretty fun.
Right on. I love it so much. And let's give some props to Robin. I don't also think it's talked about at all much. And again, to come in here and play bass and hold it down against all these other factors, like almost lead drums and these crazy songs, and just do a straight up great job as a bassist and a former playing bassist. Much respect there.
Well, just in the interest of full disclosure and not to throw any shade on Robin, but Dan actually recorded the bass lines for the record. It was a matter of expedience and everything else. And now Robin's gonna have to figure out how to do it live. So she got to work cut out for her. I was very resistant to the idea of having Dan do it, and then I heard some of his bass stuff, and I was like, okay, because as a guitar player that has played bass on stuff, like I can hear the difference between a guitar player playing bass and a bassist. And I thought Dan did a really good job of playing like a bassist.
Yeah, absolutely. Sound, yeah, no notes. Good job. I I love hearing it. So yeah, that's awesome. And then of course, let's talk about this. Also in the tribute theme, this album artwork is really special. It kind of it's got all the feels. It does kind of feel like Human, but it also feels like it's a very apt tribute to Sean. It's kind of also like reflective of the times and the whole circumstance of everything. So it's a really cool piece of art. Probably my favorite artwork of all the Gruesome records.
Wow, thank you. I mean, I didn't create it, but we wanted to work with Renee. His last name always escapes me. The guy that did Human, but he is no longer doing art. I found him on Instagram. The label reached out to him. He's in the Florida Keys, and I can't remember if he's doing real estate stuff or boat stuff or something. Anyway, so we couldn't get him. Luckily, Travis Smith, who did the artwork for Sound of Perseverance, is very much still doing album covers, and it was really easy to get in touch with. And he and I had a really good email exchange. Just he's like, what's this album about? Like, what is it? You know, what's the theme? What's going on here? And what kind of imagery do you see? And, you know, we're like, well, we want to use the same kind of color palette as Human, but we want it to be a different kind of image. And, you know, we talked through, you know, a bunch of stuff. And Travis was just, I mean, I was kind of taken aback by what a joy it was to work with him. He is the first cover artist I've ever worked with that sent me so much good stuff. At one point, I was like, dude, stop, please stop. Because I had narrowed it down to like 3 things. And now I'm like, now there's like 2 more. And then there's all these other elements. I was like, we have so much great stuff here. And everything you're doing is killer. But like, we got to, you know, we need to figure this out and go forward. You know, and it really nailed it. There's, you know, something kind of, I'm just glancing over at the record here. There's something kind of uncertain. There's like a sense of loss about it, you know, but there's something that is kind of scary, but also kind of emotional, you know. I mean, I kind of have my own ideas about what exactly is going on, but I think that what's cool about it is that 10 people will see it and, you know, they'll all be sort of in the same neighborhood, but they're all going to find their own kind of home within it and something that will speak to them, you know, if they choose to take the time to really look at it. You know?
Right on. Not to put you on the spot, but this is coming up a lot lately. I'm so glad that you're still working with real artists. And I understand that budgets are not what they used to be, and labels are cutting places, and labels are not every label is Relapse, but we are seeing kind of this weird disconnect between like, okay, if the place to cut the budget is the artwork, or the opt to do the lyric video is with AI. And I'm not against AI, because AI has been part of our world, and machine learning has been part of our world for a long time. But I'm glad that still real artists matter, real art matters, especially in death metal. It's been a genre defined by art in a way as much as music. And so I don't want to lose that ever, you know? So I wanted to get your take on that. If you have the option to work with an artist, obviously, clearly you just did. So I appreciate that about y'all. And I want you to keep doing that. But because I want to still have artists and producers and creators get paid for making stuff. So I don't know if you have a take on that at all. I don't look down on bands that do the AI art because it's everywhere now. But like at the same time, it's like, could have did a little, you know, could have taken a little more time with that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my take on it is I have zero interest in using AI to create anything, whether it's a band bio, whether it's an album cover, or even a lyric video. I have no interest in it. And I may be old and curmudgeonly. I'm not against Photoshop. I'm not against Pro Tools. I'm not against editing your drums. I'm not against, you know, filtering your photos or any of that stuff. I am against just feeding a bunch of information to a machine that spits something out and you just take it. Because to me, that feels like this sort of passive consumer, plop yourself down in front of the TV and watch whatever's on mentality, which is kind of antithetical to what I think is great about metal and the underground in the first place. Because you know, even somebody who's not, you know, whatever, hasn't been listening to death metal for fucking 30 whatever years like I have, you know, you choose to listen to Cannibal Corpse, even a Mon Amarth, you know, who's like a huge band or whatever. You don't just happen to hear that on the radio one day and tap your toe, or like turn on an awards show and see it and be like, oh yeah, I like these guys. That's cool. This is something that you choose. And when the people making the art don't give a fuck about choosing, or that they think that it's okay to just sort of feed information to a computer that randomly spits out something that they may or may not like, I don't care for that. And I get that, yeah, being a good songwriter has nothing to do with album artwork. I totally get it. You can be a great songwriter and have something amazing to say musically and be like, I have no visual component. Like, I don't think about images, whatever. So whatever, if somebody else is going to do it, that's great. I can't stop them. I personally find it deeply distasteful. And one of the things that I really like about underground music, especially, you know, again, old guy, cold take. But when I was coming into it in the 80s, even the bands that were on major labels, you know, your Metallica, Slayers, whatever, there was still a very kind of homemade aspect to a lot of the stuff that you would see. I mean, like if you look at the cover for like Hell Awaits, I mean, it looks like the sickest artist in your county who is a senior in high school drew it. That's what it looks like. And that's rad, because to me, what I like about that is that if you're a kid or if you're a guy who maybe just has a passion for music, but you're not phenomenally technically skilled or whatever, that says this is the place for you. This is where you can come and learn and grow in real time and put stuff out that is wild and fucking it's your own shit and it's interesting because you're making it. Because by the time something gets on MTV in those days, nowadays, whatever, by the time the algorithm recommends it to you, it's been vetted, it's been produced, it's been massaged, it's been PR'd, it's been manicured, it's been airbrushed, it's been filtered, whatever. And if you look, you went to a record store and you bought, an underground record in the late 80s, chances are it's four guys writing the music, one guy recording it, and some dude painting it, and sometimes they're the same people, like, the early Voivod. It's all fucking Away's artwork. And that is the appeal of it to me. The appeal is that you're getting something really made by another person and you're getting it sort of directly. And when you bring a computer into the creative process, not just the execution process, the recording part, that's the execution process, right? But when you bring it into the creative part and you're like, hey, computer, what's a good death metal album cover? That seems dishonest to me. I'd rather see a shitty, pen drawing, like the old Mantis tape covers. Those are fucking killer because they are real shit made by a real weird kid somewhere in Florida in the 80s, just fucking being like, fuck society, fuck mom and dad, and feeling a real emotion and getting it out, even if it's childish or silly or whatever. The reality of it, the sincerity of it is the value, not the execution, in my opinion. So I don't ever want to use AI.
I got you. I appreciate that so much. Great answer. Two last quick questions for you. Obviously, your record comes out on Friday, and then on Sunday in Tampa, Kirk and Rob in the Metallica show Pull the Plug.
I saw that.
Upstaging your tribute to Sean with their own tribute to death. I think inherently that's super cool. That Rob and Kirk learn Pull the Plug to play it in Tampa as a tribute to Death and Chuck. I think that was lovely. And I know what a huge Metallica fan you are. I'm kind of over the doodles. I know that Lars needs a break so he doesn't die. I know James needs to take a leak or take another sip of his whiskey, whatever the fuck he's doing. So the doodle has a purpose. So those other guys get a break, right? And right. Kirk and Rob don't need a break, apparently, but except for the little interludes. But I thought it was really nice for them to do that. And I'm sure some of the fans caught on. It seemed like there was a nice cheer that went up. I watched the video, but at the same time, it's like, oh, that's really cool. Like they do these things in every city, and sometimes I'm like, ugh, why? And then they did this. So I didn't know if you saw it or not.
I did see it. I mean, at the end of the day, Metallica is my favorite band. And I think it's kind of what Rob and Kirk do is just kind of cute, And if they weren't playing, they play fucking 15 songs and their songs are average 6 minutes each. So if they were only playing for an hour, I'd be like, come on, dude. We want to hear Trapped Under Ice or whatever, moving along. But it's a very expansive show. And I think just something that takes it back to the fun of a couple guys jamming on riffs is, it's pretty charming. And, I know that when they were in Switzerland and they did a Celtic Frost riff, Tom Warrior got all pissed off about it. And it's just dude, at the end of the day, who cares? It's you can roll your eyes at it or you can think it's awesome, but it's whatever. Death metal at this point is part of the overall metal culture. It's been here since, the mid 80s. In one form or another. And, of course those guys are aware of it. Actually we were in the group chat for Left to Die, we were texting about it. And I was like, well, Terry, when I went to see you guys in March of 1990 in Oakland, a bunch of people were like, oh, dude, did you hear James from Metallica is here? I didn't see him, but a bunch of people. And then Terry's like, yeah, we saw him when we were loading out or whatever. I was like, oh, okay. It's like, okay, cool, man. These guys, it's not that they have their finger on the pulse or whatever, but they're people in the metal world like anybody else. It's
yeah,
cool.
that kind of cosign does. I like the respect shown. It does feel good as a fan. Hey, anytime you want to do a Metallica cover band, not that you need another singer, but I volunteer. My yeahs are on point. I'll just say that everybody who knows me knows. My first cover when I play bass and sing, I used to do all the boom the bell tolls and all that BS. But I just rather sing. I just rather yell into a stick these days if I can. But if you ever want to do one, I'm around. Just the last question. I always end with a wild card, and I always love your wild card question answers. I love seeing all your your comic book boxes there. Do you have a favorite book of all time?
Um, I mean, it's kind of tough. I guess it would be somewhere between Avengers #4, which is when Captain America gets thawed out of the ice. That's something that I bought I think I bought it at a WonderCon in the early '90s. It was, it's pretty beat up. I think I got it for like, $100 or something. It's certainly, even as beat up as it is now, it's certainly worth a lot more than that nowadays. That's kind of the first one that comes to mind, but maybe, and I always forget which number this is, but the Fantastic Four issue, This Man, This Monster, where the guy steals Ben Grimm's powers to get revenge on Reed Richards. They go into, I can't remember if it's a negative zone or another dimension, and he's like, fuck Reed, I'm gonna kill him here, and nobody will know because I'm in this other dimension. And all Reed Richards does is like save his family and like work to save everybody else. And he's like, oh shit, this guy I hated, like he's actually awesome, and like I'm a piece of shit. And he ends up sacrificing himself in the other dimension. And Reed comes back just devastated that, he thinks the Thing has died. And then the Thing comes back and they figure it out. That's probably the one I think that hits me in the feels the most in a more complicated way. But I mean, I could go on for several days.
Nice. I know you could. We probably have to do a whole episode on that.
I would be any excuse to talk about comics. Like I'm all
yeah. I'm mild. It came up in our interview for your solo stuff too. I'm mildly excited for this Fantastic Four movie, but I'm guarded because they've been not. There were things I loved about those other movies, but then a lot of stuff I didn't love. So I'm hopeful they get it.
I mean, with Marvel's current track record, I have a feeling it's going to be good and not spectacular, but I think that it's going to have a different enough feel. Like, in the Exhumed van, Ross and I have had these conversations at length about how to do the Fantastic Four correctly. And my biggest thing was always, it has to be in the 60s, because if you take the Fantastic Four out of the 1960s, it doesn't make sense. If you just put them in the modern MCU, it's going to seem idiotic. And then you also get a bunch of comedy with a fish out of water if they come to the modern times, But so they've sort of solved that problem by putting them in this retro futuristic alternate dimension that should allow for the FF to be the real FF. I think it's going to be good. The casting is good. Galactus looks cool. They fix the Silver Surfer's hair, then we'll be fine. I don't know. I mean, I like the vast majority of the Marvel movies to varying degrees. Some of them I think are great. Some I'm like, but I've seen all of them at least once,
Same. At least once, probably more than once. Thunderbolts was a lot of fun. I give them respect for doing that right. And New Avengers, whatever, asterisk.
I think Thunderbolts was super fun, and like it's underperformed at the box office. I guess it's done okay.
Yeah.
But it seems like all movies are kind of underperforming, and the 48th installment in the Marvel series, it's like, well, yeah, people's attention spans, the casual fans, which is most of the people, they're wearing thin. For me, I'd go every week. I go every opening day. My wife's like, really? You can't wait until Friday? And I was like, no, I want to read the reviews and shit. I want to know what
the spoilers are going to happen on YouTube. I can't watch any videos then.
Right. And I just want to know. I'm excited. And she's like, don't you ever get tired of these? I was like, nope. She's like, not even a little. I was like, nope.
Nice work. Your wife deserves an award. And you are a gentleman and scholar. Once again, Matt Harvey, always a pleasure. New Gruesome album out now, and new Exhumed on the way, and hopefully some new other things. I'll see you around the way, or I'll see you on one of these again soon. Thanks, pal.
Definitely. Thank you, man. Good to see you.
See you soon.
All right, dude. Take care.
Peace.